What are some unethical and possibly illegal life hacks? Did this in college. Buy all your textbooks and keep the receipts. Return to the store later that day or a few days later. Most bookstores don't give 100% refunds after the first week. Grab the book you bought off the shelf. Take the book to the cashier and tell them you want to return it and show your receipt. If they require a reason, say you dropped the class or are sharing the book with a friend. Get money back and leave. Never paid for books and got money back on resale at the end of the term. Most cashiers I have, especially at the beginning of the term when you are buying books, are temporary student workers who don't give a shit most of the time. Bankruptcy won't discharge student loans. Get 50k in credit. Pay off student loans, make minimum payment for 6 months. Stop paying for 6 months. Let them go to collections. File for bankruptcy. Bankruptcy will cost you $2K. You are now debt free. Honestly, this is the only get out of jail free card left for graduates who are underemployed. By adding a random one-way third leg onto a round-trip flight, you can sometimes fool the airline into dropping the fuel charges that usually add $300 $400 onto the ticket. It's called a fuel dump by frequent flyers. Example: let's say you want to save some money on your honeymoon to Tahiti. Search on Expedia for a flight from Los Angeles, LAX, to Tahiti, PPT, that departs on the 22nd of October and returns on the 28th of October. The cheapest trip is on Air France for $1,450. Now, try setting this up as a multi-leg journey on Expedia. The first two flights are the same as the above, but also add a third leg on the 23rd of November from Rio de Janeiro, GIG, to Vitoria, VIX. The total price of the ticket drops to $1,157, using Air France for the LAX PPT flights and Air France's partner GOL for the regional Brazilian flight. You don't even have to fly the third leg. Call the airline and cancel after you've finished the Tahiti trip. The third leg is scheduled far enough out that the frequent flyer miles from the actual trip should have already posted, so you won't lose out on them. Why does it work? The total price of an airline ticket is constructed using a complex set of rules and algorithms, especially for how to calculate all the taxes and fees and allocate them to the various government agencies and airlines involved in your trip. One of the biggest fees of all is the fuel surcharge that almost every airline charges for international trips. Rather than make you pay $500 in base fare, all of which is subject to a 7.5% US government excise tax, assuming a US departure, they will charge you $150 in base fare and $250 as a fuel surcharge that is not subject to the tax. Airline charges you the same, but pockets more. In certain cases, the algorithm for calculating when to add a fuel charge is not properly programmed to handle trips that involve multiple airlines across multiple geographies. By paying $50 or so for a one-way ticket in Brazil, the system neglects to add $350 in fuel fees for the trip to Tahiti, for a net savings of $300. There is a healthy but secretive subculture of frequent flyers who fill forums with the details when they find a combination of 1. Tickets with a low base fare and high fuel charge. I have seen transatlantic flights with a $50 base and $400 fuel charge, and to the right glitch in the matrix where you can make that charge go away by booking a third leg. My dad was a private investigator when I was a kid. 85% of his job consisted of just sitting in his truck waiting for someone to come out of somewhere. If there was no free parking available, he would just park wherever he wanted and then put for traffic cones around his truck. Eventually he even got a hard hat and one of those fluorescent vests construction workers wear and threw them in the bed of his truck to make it look like the truck belonged to a construction worker. He never once got a ticket. I watched a documentary where a bunch of Italian students and filmmakers printed the Google logo on a small white rented car and then went to the busiest intersections of Rome and parked in the middle of the road, surrounded the car with witches' hats, traffic cones, and just stood there with noteboards and pens and a few cameras and stuff and spent over 2 hours there without a single person bothering them. They did similar ridiculous things whilst pretending to represent other huge companies and never got in trouble. The point of the doco was to explain that if you represent one of these companies that everyone knows, you can get away with almost anything and people just leave you alone or assume that you are allowed to do whatever you want. When I was running low on food, I would eat the free breakfast at the hotel 2 minutes from my apartment. My strategy here was to walk to the elevator first, go up a floor, go back to ground, and conspicuously walk from the elevator to the breakfast. Edit. I definitely meant conspicuously, as in, to emphasize that my point of origin was the elevator. Need references for your job interview? Have a friend fake it. Just make it believable and don't pick something you shouldn't be doing. References are just people who don't know you calling people they don't know for information they can't confirm. If you're otherwise qualified, there's no reason it should be a barrier. My friend tried this once and used me as a reference. Ended up on a half-an-hour call with a third-party fact checker. The fact checker happened to be my neighbor's mom. My friend got the job, but it was a terrible experience all around. This one isn't really illegal, but if you go to Dunkin' Donuts about 30 minutes before closing time, they will give you all their leftover donuts if you ask. If you don't, they just throw them away. Sadly, all the ones by me are open 24 hours long, so I can't do unethical things now. I used to work at a 24-hour Dunkin', and if someone came up and asked for a donut, like just one for free, I would give it to them. I didn't give a crap, and I don't think a lot of minimum wage workers do. This won't apply to all parking garages, but I used to park at one where, right before I paid my ticket at that vending machine type doohickey, I would walk back to the entrance gate, press the button for another ticket and pay instead with a new one. I would be charged according to my stay of 30 seconds, when in reality I had been there for hours. I did this for about a year, and I calculated that I scammed over $1,000 from a garage. They caught on and changed the sensors that would allow getting a ticket. Now only the weight of a car will allow you to get a ticket. Just have your mom get it then. I went to a university where the student to parking ratio was extremely terrible. You would basically have to show up 2 hours before class, if you lived off campus, to get a parking spot. Personally, I lived on campus, so for me parking wasn't that bad unless I left the campus before 5 PM. So every time I walked to my car later in the day, I noticed that the parking spot right in the front, prime piece of parking, always had an orange cone on it. There was nothing wrong with it, it just had an orange cone. Later that semester I had to go get something out of my car in the morning, and see a guy drive up to the cone spot, get out of his car, put the cone in the trunk, and proceed to park. Turns out this guy has been doing this for months, using the cone to reserve his spot. Apparently no one ever questions or moves the cone when he places it back on the parking spot when he leaves. I have one like this. When I was in college, they did a good deal of construction around campus, as is pretty normal on college campuses. My buddy used to keep a cone in his trunk and park up on the curb and simply place a cone on his roof. Apparently the cone on the roof shtick was an unofficial sign that this car belonged to a contractor construction person, and as a result, he never got a ticket. He did this for nearly 1.5 years and then graduated. When we were teens, we used to go to the movies on busy nights in large groups. Two people would buy tickets, enter the theater. One person would head back outside with the two stubs and bring a third person in. Third person would exit with both stubs and bring a fourth person in. We sometimes repeated this until we had over a dozen people in the theater for the price of 2 tickets. The ushers never saw the same face more than twice. When someone says, "Have a nice day," don't say, "You, too." Hoard everyone's nice days, until you are immortal on nice days, other people's nice days. If you see a baby with candy, you can take it and there's literally nothing they can do about it. Free baby. If it looks like you belong, no one will ask any questions. A clipboard and a button-up will get you through most doors. And in other news today, a man was arrested wearing nothing but a dress shirt and carrying a clipboard. In a fist fight, if the other guy goes down, immediately get on top of him, wrap your non-dominant hand around his throat and lean into it with your body weight. His first instinct will be to go for your arm to stop you from strangling him, and he will leave his face unprotected. Use those few moments to land a few really solid punches with your dominant hand. Edit. After seeing how many upvotes and responses this has, I should point out that I don't have the slightest clue if it would actually work. I completely made it up in the time it took me to type the post. Struggling to write CV, or can't get a particular job? Post fake job offerings on websites such as Indeed.co.uk for that position you're interested in and watch the CV's resumes pour in, which you can then copy for your own advantage. If you're going to the movie theater, hide snacks in your pockets. Unless the theater explicitly bans food from the room, it's totally fine usually, and most employees don't get paid enough to care. Get caught and really want to be unethical, if they tell you to throw it away, just make up a condition that would require you to intake more food. Diabetics and hypoglycemics need sugar. Edit. I should not be a doctor. I've noticed that it only takes about 2 or 3 prompts, spread out temporally, to instill a false memory in someone. Why not just put a spinning top in a safe and their child at home? Of course you'd need to get them asleep first. I think that's how it works. The best public bathrooms in a city are in the expensive hotels. Photocopy the out of order signs at the computer lab so you can reserve one for yourself later if you have a problem with it being full. But if it's packed and there are people around you, how do you just plop down at an out of service computer and proceed to use it like normal? With confidence. You can use an empty Visa Rewards bank card to make in-flight purchases. The cards cannot be run while in flight, so all transactions are completed once you land, so you can receive any item you want for free. There is no way to track the failed transaction because your information is not tied to the card. My friend is a pilot and I have done this for years. But it could be tied to your seat number, which most likely is tied to your info. So, just works on Southwest then? For people reading this that haven't flown Southwest, unlike most airlines, Southwest does not have assigned seating, and when you board, you pick whichever seat you like. You actually give your ticket to the gate person before even boarding, so there's no paper trail of any kind for the airline to figure out who was sitting where. Piracy. Water type or movie downloading type? Both, I suppose. I'm just picturing some guy on a wooden pirate ship with a parrot and a wooden leg, torrenting the latest season of Black Sails. If someone says, "Do you love me?" and you're about to have sex, say yes no matter what. Never tell crazy you love them. How many punts could a pint punting punt a punt if a punt pinting painter could punt pints? Subscribe to find out.